This is Screencast 5.9. We're going to talk about mining. So mining isn't just coal, it's all kinds of minerals. And if you look at periodic table to some extent, really any sort of modern material relies on some serious mineral commodities. And of course, all these things have to be mined. So when you look at how much of the Earth's crust is made up of these elements, you can see it's a pretty small number. Most of the Earth's crust is silicate materials, which have aluminum or calcium or iron in them. But all those special things that we looked at on the previous slide, that kind of goes under the greater than 0.1% in the other elements. So not a very big number. When we're talking about mining, some important vocabulary. Ore is any sort of accumulation of minerals that are economically valuable and that can be extracted. Metals are considered elements that conduct electricity, heat, or other functions. Commonly, you'll think of copper or nickel, aluminum, and to some extent gold in this category. And finally, a reserve is the known quantity of resource that can be recovered, but recovered economically. There are lots of resources out there that we know about that could be recovered, but you can't make money doing it, and so those resources remain in place. There are really two types of ore. So there's high-grade ore, which is a high concentration of the desired material, and then low-grade ore is a lower concentration of that. Some companies have estimated the amount of metal that's left in known reserves, and this was done relatively recently, but again, these are just known reserves, going out 20 to 40 years. It's hard to imagine that we're actually run out of these metals, and the way economics works is that as the reserves dwindle and the price goes up, other reserves become more economically viable than they were before. So this is probably an estimate just based on current economics. We're going to look at two major mining techniques, so surface mining and underground mining. Both types of mining create spoils, or also called tailings. So this is any portion of soil or rock that's been removed to access the ore. And then the ore is, material is removed from the ore. Other remaining waste can be called slag. Looking at surface mining, there is strip mining, where soil is removed, sort of as it says in strips, right, in rows, and exposes both the rock and the ore. Sometimes in this case, the material is removed and the resource is extracted, and then the spoils or tailings are returned to the place. It's often used for coal and also sand mining. Open pit mining is where there's a big pit in the ground, and the resource has to be close to the surface for this, otherwise it doesn't make sense. You're removing too much material. This has been used for copper. I myself have toured a copper mine before. There's also mountaintop removal, where the resource is like higher up, and you just lop off the, the top of the hill that you're on. This is easily done with explosives, and then tailings can be left in different places. Mountaintop mining is very destructive. If you look at a side-by-side photo of before and after mountaintop mining, it looks something like this. Right, this is Mud River, West Virginia, and it used to look nice and green and luscious, and now it doesn't. An older kind of mining is called placer mining. Right, this is still surface mining, but when you look in river sediments, sometimes you can find minerals and metals that have been eroded away from mountains. This tends to be valuables that aren't weathered easily, right? So diamonds or gold don't really weather, and so it's easier to find them. This is not as common because, in the 1800s, a lot of these easy-to-reach deposits were already found, so they're not common anymore. The other type of mining is subsurface mining, and you can consider this for resources that are as much as 100 meters and greater distance beneath the surface. This is much more expensive than surface mining, mostly because it's hard and labor-intensive to drill holes and tunnels. Often this is used for coal and diamonds and gold, right? Things that are highly valuable, and so it's worth the trouble to do these expensive and dangerous underground mining techniques. If you look at a cross-section of underground, you can see a couple of different underground mining techniques. So when you have a vertical shaft that goes down, and then horizontal shafts branch off of that in the direction of whatever the ore is. You can also have incline shafts, which are a little easier to get up and down, and then those diagonal shafts follow the veins and then use horizontal shafts to access the veins. As you might expect, there's some pretty major impacts on the environment because of mining. One big one is air pollution, so due to dust particles, especially for surface mining, but then indoor air quality is very low inside underground mines as well. There's a fair amount of fossil fuel emissions from the equipment that's doing the mining. Water contamination is pretty common. So if there are tailings, if they're at the surface and uncovered, then rain will precipitate on the tailings, and stuff will get carried away. Sometimes fine particles, some type of stuff is eroded away, and then that contaminates the water. Also, you can have pooling inside of different types of surface mines that dig into the earth, like the open pit mining. If water collects at the bottom of the open pit mine, it can easily get contaminated as well. Effects on the soil. Well, in a lot of the surface mining, soil's just removed, right? It's just gone. And the other thing that happens because of that is that there's no vegetation. So when it rains, there's a huge amount of weathering and erosion on these open pit mines, these strip mines, because there literally isn't any more vegetation to protect and maintain the soil. Finally, there's a fair amount of habitat destruction, especially with the surface mining. There's a lot of access roads that fragments the habitat of the ecosystem that the open pit mine is in. I alluded to issues with human health. So the underground mining especially, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to keep people breathing clean air when they're in the underground mines. A lot of old miners, like career miners who worked underground, have a thing called black lung from inhaling particles, especially coal dust particles. All right, well, that's our screencast on mining. Please let me know if you have any questions.